I just wanted to open with, I know I used to be in high school, and I know how hard it is to come out on Monday nights, to commit every week, once a week, and to commit to an hour of learning out of your time. And I know you might have busy schedules, and you might have tests, and yet you guys all come out consistently every week. So I want to say yashar koach to everybody for coming out, and you should all continue to come out every week and bring your friends too, and support this great program. As the signs of the former Rosh Beit Midrash of Toronto used to say, when after May of Esther, when they ask you when they ask you Kavat Yitim L'Torah, you can say back every Monday night at 8:00 p.m. So I just wanted to open with that. So what I want to discuss was, as it kind of leads from the weather we've been having outside. Most of you go to school, you get up in the morning, you go into your car, and it's probably pitch black. And I'm not talking to people who live on top of the school, but it's probably pitch black. And then when you leave the school at night, it's probably also pitch black. And really, you don't really get to be outside in the sun. You don't get a lot of sunlight. And even when you are outside at this time of year, the sky is like gray, and there's not really any sun anywhere. So it can be a very depressing time of year, and so much so that I don't know if you take Wikipedia statistics to be real or not, but when I checked on Wikipedia, it said that 14.3% of people in the United States suffer from some form of what's called seasonal affective disorder, just abbreviated as SAD. It's basically when the weather gets cold and really dark, people get depressed. So I want to segue into the Gemara. There's a Gemara in Masechet Tanit on Daf Tet Amud Aleph. It goes like this, and you're probably all familiar with some form of it, but it quotes the Mishnah of the parak, which says Mishenichnas av v'matin b'simcha, and it says Amar Rabbi Yehuda Brei Rav Shmuel Bar Shilat Bishmei Rav Kishem she Mishenichnas av v'matin b'simcha kach Mishenichnas adar marbin b'simcha. Just like when Av comes around, we're supposed to decrease in our happiness. So too, when Adar comes, the exact opposite. We're supposed to increase our happiness. And the Gemara kind of ends there. It brings one more point after, but that's really the extent that it talks about increasing your happiness in Adar. And interestingly, so what is the scope of this comparison? Is it a full comparison? Are we supposed to do all the things opposite that we do in Av to decrease our happiness? Are we supposed to do the opposite of all of them in Adar to increase our happiness? Is it just that Av is sadness and Adar is happiness? What is the basis of this? What's the scope of the comparison? Interestingly enough, this is really the only place that such a thing is mentioned. I know it's become a popularized song, it's very catchy, but it's not really mentioned anywhere in the Shulchan Aruch, or any halacha, it's not mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. So it's not considered halacha per se by the Shulchan Aruch, which I thought was interesting. This is really the only place that it is mentioned, aside for maybe the Rishon or the Rishon and Achronim probably mention it, but it's not halacha. So what is this strange rule? What is this strange statement? We have no also by when it talks about Av, it gives all these qualifications, all these steps on how to decrease our happiness. We have the 3 weeks, the 9 days, Shavuot Shechalbo, but when it comes to Adar, it doesn't tell us anything. It just kind of leaves us. It says we should bring up our happiness, but it doesn't give us much of a direction or much process. So I think just to comment on this, I think a lot of it has to do with the mindset that you have. How much you let things in life bring you down versus how much you value and appreciate the things that are hard to recognize. One of my favorite Hasidic stories. Well, first of all, I just want to say that the Hasidic movement was, just to give a little history, it was founded on a lot of the Jewish population of the time was illiterate, and a lot of them couldn't learn, and only a select few could really learn all day and learn Gemara, and people didn't really know how to connect to Hashem. So the Baal Shem Tov, the movement was started by the Baal Shem Tov. I hope I'm getting this all right, but that you can also approach Hashem out of happiness. You can approach Hashem out of you don't have to learn all day to get close to Hashem. You can sing, you can be happy, and you can form your own way of Avodah Hashem through Simcha without being a great lamdan or without being able to read the Gemara perfectly. So one of my favorite stories involves a guy who there was a man reading the Gemara in Brachot. I apologize, I don't exactly remember the daf, but the Gemara in Brachot says Kishem she mevarchin al hara'ah kach mevarchin al tova. Just like you make Kishem she mevarchin al tova kach mevarchin al hara'ah. Just like you make a bracha on the good, say a tova meitiv, so too you should make a bracha on the bad. You should bless the bad when it comes to you. So the man was struggling with the Gemara. He wasn't sure how to interpret it. He comes to the Maggid Mezrich, who was a great Hasidic figure at the time, and he says, Maggid, I don't understand this Gemara. What does it mean to bless the bad? I understand if it'll say, like, if it would have said accept the bad, but what does it mean to bless the bad? I don't understand. So the Maggid says, I think you'll find the answer if you go to my Talmud, Reb Zushya. So Reb Zushya is also another famous Hasidic figure at the time, and the man goes to Reb Zushya's house, and he knocks on the door. Reb Zushya lets him in, kind, very warm, and the man enters the house and he sees it's filthy. It's totally, it's dirty, it's in terrible condition, and Reb Zushya is a very poor man. He doesn't have really anything, and Reb Zushya still lets him in with complete happiness and complete cheer, and he sits him down for dinner, and his wife, and Reb Zushya's wife brings out the food, but there's really not enough to feed their family, and Reb Zushya yet still is, the entire time, is very cheerful and very happy, and treats the man very nicely and makes jokes, and you can see that none of it affects him. So finally, at the end of the meal, Reb Zushya says to him, "So, what brings you to my house? What business do you have here?" And the man says, "Well, I asked the Maggid Mezrich a question, your Rabbi, and he sent me here." So Reb Zushya asked, "What did you ask the Maggid? Maybe I don't know if I could help you, but what did you ask him?" So he tells him the question that he asks him, and Reb Zushya says back, "I'm sorry, but I'm not really sure why the Maggid sent you to me. He should have sent you to somebody who experiences suffering, who experiences pain. I've never had a bad day in my life, so I'm sorry, I can't help you." I think that's one aspect of happiness, to be able to appreciate what you have and to not let things that might bring you down to really pull through and drive right through them. Going back to the Gemara, Rashi makes one comment that may help us understand what it means to increase in happiness. He says, on Mishnifnas Adar, it says, Yemei Nisim Hayu Yisrael, Purim v'Pesach. So many people think that when we sing Mishnifnas Adar, we're talking about the miracle of Purim. But it's interesting that Rashi includes the word Pesach. And I think it changes the entire message of the Gemara. It's interesting that the Gemara doesn't mention Nisan at all, it just mentioned Adar, and we wouldn't have any implication that Pesach would be included in this. So what does Rashi mean when he says Purim vit Pesach? So if this is the case, then what is the cause for Simcha? It's clearly not just Purim. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden in Sheilot Yavetz, by the way, I saw this on a blog online, I wasn't able to see inside, but he writes that Rashi includes Pesach to symbolize that really we're celebrating the era of Geula. Purim and Pesach are two holidays of redemption, of Geula, and we're celebrating the time of Adar to Nisan, where it's kind of like a national Geula and a personal Geula. And this is a direct contrast to Av, which is all about Galut and destruction. So what we're supposed to do, the focus of entering Adar, is to keep in mind, in our mindset, the Geula, which is happening in our lives, and the Geula which happened to us. And I think how we can really fulfill this part of the message is it's very amazing if you view what happened last week in international news in a historical context. And Harper said it himself when he was addressing the Knesset. He mentioned that in 1939, in 1940, Canada's policy with accepting Jewish refugees, there's a famous quote from the Canadian minister, said, "One Jew is too many." And Harper said that himself. He mentioned it, and and the contrast between then and today is such a stark contrast in how Jews are viewed in the world and how far we've come as Jewish people. And really the times that we're living in are truly, I think they are miraculous. It's the first time that, since the time of Beit Sheni, that the Jews are really in control of Makom Mikdash, I believe. And we're really finding the times we live in right now are really times that no other Jew has really could have even dreamed of in the past hundreds of years. And as the story goes, I'll say it quickly because we're running out of time. But Michael was a Jew who lived he grew up in New York in the 60s, and he died in about in about 2000 or 2001, and he went up to heaven, and once he got to heaven, he encounters a Jew dressed in very like desert clothing and very basic clothes that you expect one to wear back from like in ancient days. So he introduces himself, says, "Hi, I'm Michael," and the Jew says back to him, "Hi, I'm." He gives a name, and so he says, "Oh, so what's your story? What time period did you live in?" Michael says back, "Well, I was just a." Oh, sorry. First, Michael asks him, "What time period are you from?" "I see you're wearing clothing that I don't recognize." He says, "I'm from the time of Abraham, when everybody was starting to recognize God, and I was part of Abraham's movement." And then they bump into another Jew who's also dressed in similar ancient desert clothing, and he asks him, "Oh, what time period are you from?" And he says, "I'm from the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim, where we were able to cross the Yam Suf and all the miracles that we saw in the desert." And then finally they turn to him and they say, "What time period are you from?" And Michael says, "I was just a regular accountant living in New York from 1950 to 2000. Nothing really exciting ever happened in my lifetime." And they looked at him with their mouths wide open. They're in shock. They said, "How can you say that? The state of Israel was established, the 6-day war, all these miracles," and they started naming all these miracles that Michael didn't realize that happened to the Jewish people. He just didn't perceive them to be as miracles. And obviously the story can't be taken literally, because those events don't match up with Yetziat Mitzrayim and events like that. But I think that one thing that we often do is we don't necessarily appreciate the value of the time period that we're living in, and in a historical context. And I think that that's exactly what Rashi means, and what Rabbi Yaakov Emden means when he says you may nisim hayu Yisrael Purim Pesach. And maybe the emphasis of our mindset should be going into these days of Adar and Nisan, that we should kind of appreciate the geula of the time that we're living in, and appreciate life.